Operation Truth. The show they don't want you to see. Now, here's your host, Lou.
Operation Truth. We were previously branded as Between the Lines. I encourage you to look up the episodes and under Between the Lines, as well as Operation Truth. You're going to see consistency. We consistently discuss with you this border issue, which is problematic. Guys, it's problematic. We're allowing people to come into this country in excess of 5 million that they're volunteering to you by number, not including the people that overstay visas who come through the northern border. They're pretty forward about telling you they can't afford to take care of them. We have no place to house them in cities like New York. Eric Adams was pretty vocal about Biden's policy at the border. Eric's a Democrat, by the way. And I'm not criticizing the president because he's a Democrat. I would say the same thing if he was a Republican. We just can't have the criteria to enter the country, a swimming lesson across the Rio Grande, guys. That's not how this is being done. But with that being said, that's only one of the problems. We have a problem with this economy because we've overspent. I got a little chuckle out of this thing about the debt ceiling, that if we didn't raise the debt ceiling, we were going to go bankrupt. We're $31 trillion in the hole. What is the amount of money you need to hit in deficit before you go bankrupt? I'm just curious. They talk to us like we're stupid. And you know why that is? Because we're distracted. And you want to believe and trust in the people that you elect. Guys, I want to make everybody mindful of something. The population of this country isn't 335 million. It's probably bumping up against 360 million. You have 435 House of Representative members and 100 U.S. senators, 535 people that are steering 360 million. We need a third party, to be very candid with you. And I won't go off on this tangent about Michael Bloomberg, who got slapped from one end of a primary stage to the other on 2 appearances, who, by the way, blew $500 million and could have funded a legitimate third party. I won't delve any more deeply into that. I'm going to take a fast break, and I'm going to bring in Tom Fuentes. We're gonna track and trace where the questioning of the legitimacy of government in our country overall started. And you're going to hear us again start out by just touching on the Kennedy assassination, the loss of the innocence of this country. We'll be right back, guys. Stay with me.
The world is in crisis, with political unrest and financially unstable countries trying to print their way to prosperity by taking on trillions of dollars of new debt. It's incredibly concerning. That's why you need to own silver as a hedge. So call today to receive the free hard asset information kit on how easy it is to own silver. Green energy demands will possibly turbocharge silver prices to 50, 100, even 300 an ounce, according to many experts around the world. Silver is a proven hedge against inflation. Since 1971, silver has returned over 11% when averaged yearly. Silver is a proven wealth preservation for hundreds of years. Hard Asset Management is a trusted leader in precious metals and rare coins for nearly 40 years. We have the guaranteed lowest prices, fast and easy ordering, expedited shipping, with award-winning customer service available 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. CST, Monday through Friday. So protect yourself from the chaos. Invest in stability with Hard Asset Management. Call now and get your free Hard Asset Management information kit on how easy it is for you to own silver. 844-426-4653. 844-426-4653.
And I'm going to bring on right now Tom Fuentes, former assistant director of the FBI. I wish I could tell you everything he did in the FBI, but it's so plentiful I can't keep track of it. And I talked to this man for over 10 years. He's just been involved in so many incredible exploits in that agency, including, but not being limited to, running the international operation, 80 field offices and its agents. And he's been involved in tons of other work activities related to the safety and the security of this nation. You probably recall, and I encourage you to go back and look at some episodes, where Tom spoke to you about SCIFs and handling of classified information, and this whole discussion, which is unique unto itself, which I have to say should raise some rather interesting questions. But in the past few episodes, Tom and I have tried to track or create a timeline for you of when we started to question our government. Up to the Kennedy assassination, nobody dare question the legitimacy of government or the character or credibility of an elected official. In fact, it was Tom's organization, the FBI. They created a dossier on you. It was considered un-American. We murdered John Kennedy. We have a lot of theories as to who may have done it. Tom has presented some very good information as to what he thinks could have taken place. Other people have also supported that. Interestingly enough, there's a gentleman, Michael Franzese, who was in a Colombo crime family. His father, Sonny, was the underboss of the Colombo crime family, and he was a capo. He's a made man. He's also my client. And if you listen to Michael, a lot of what he says is consistent with what Mr. Fuentes says. But Tom, we've gone through a couple of decades, the 60s and the 70s, and now we're running around 1986 in the Reagan administration. And I know we had an Iran-Contra is that correct? Scandal, Tom?
Right.
Can we brush up against that for a moment? And
well, the deal there was that we were, part of the Reagan administration were selling weapons to Iran, basically, to make money to give to the Contras in Nicaragua and try to overthrow the communist government there. And eventually they got caught at doing that. And so that was a pretty big scandal because it was against the law to sell weaponry to Iran.
can I just stop you for a second, Tom? And I want you to correct me historically, because you're the historian in the family here. If I recall correctly, we were arming and funding Iraq to go after Iran for us at one point. Am I correct?
Yeah, back in the 1980s, for almost 10 years, the country of Iraq and the country of Iran had a bitter war with each other. And we were supplying weapons, bombs, munitions to Saddam Hussein, who was running Iraq, because we hated Iran at that point for having captured our diplomats, in the embassy back in 1979. So as a result of that, as a matter of fact, I was the FBI's first on-scene commander in Iraq in 2003, right after mission accomplished when we took over the country. And the small little barracks thing that we were staying in, little palace at the airport, was full of pictures on the walls of Donald Rumsfeld shaking hands with Saddam Hussein and other senior officials who were visiting Iraq and pledging support and giving support to Iraq to fight against Iran. Now, eventually, what happened there was after 10 years, they more or less fought to a draw and just stopped fighting. Just like we did enough is enough. And we stopped fighting with Iran, or Iraq stopped fighting with them. And they went to more of a business as usual. But again, during the 80s, the U.S. was a very close ally of Saddam Hussein and Iraq.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but we were actually close allies up until 1991, just prior to him invading Kuwait. But I want to just touch on this little bit of convoluted relationship, which is what I try to tell people oftentimes goes on, Tom. There's a lot more to these moving parts than people even know. So everybody understands, we arm and fund Iraq to go after Iran. And then we went to Iran to help us get guns to the Contra. Am I correct, Tom?
Well, when you say we, it was a very small
I have a mouse in my pocket.
Colonel Oliver North actually did all that. Then later, when the investigation started, Oliver North thought, I'll delete all my emails, nobody will know. Not realizing that if you're in the federal government and you have a federal computer, you don't delete anything. That stays forever on the servers.
No, let me tell you what happened. I'll tell you so that you understand what happened. Hillary Clinton was his coach. So you understand exactly why he got caught with the old email. So actually, to give this thing really the proper timeline, it wasn't Hillary Clinton that first didn't get the memo on emails. It was Oliver North.
Well, basically, yeah. Anybody working for the government assumed, you delete the files on your computer, it's gone. Well, it wasn't. He found out the hard way. And that's why Hillary Clinton wasn't coaching him at the time. And I know you're just being a wise guy, but anyway.
No, not me, but go ahead.
No, not you. Not a wise guy in the Michael Franzese sense. But in any event, he did that thinking he could get away with it. This is why later Hillary learned from his mistake she then didn't want government computers to do her State Department business or her Clinton Foundation business. That's why she wanted servers in her basement that were off the grid, so she could do what she wanted, delete those, smash the files, whatever, and they'd be gone. If she was operating under the State Department computer system that she was supposed to by law, that couldn't have happened.
You know,
So that
Tom,
was a very, very shrewd move. That's a whole another subject.
we moved ahead all of a sudden here, but it's so interesting because all these conversations intersect with the same problem
Correct.
we're having
Yeah,
today.
they intersect.
Absolutely. It has to do with the credibility of the country. So we skipped through the 80s. We both know Reagan was a very popular president. Second term, he won 49 of 50 states. Am I correct? During re-election?
Right.
And off we're running into the 1990s. And as I always say, Tom, I think we are truthful above all things, and we are not biased or partial to one political party or the other. We are partial to the truth. And we start to embark on some rather interesting defective foreign policies. I'd like to hear your take on Iraq, for example, in 1991.
Well, 1991 is when Iraq invades Kuwait. So that becomes Desert Storm. We're going to go and liberate Kuwait. And there's some discussion about whether the ambassador to Iraq kind of led Saddam Hussein to believe he could invade Kuwait and get away with it. And then once he invades it, the U.S. decides, oh, no, we can't have that. And George H.W. Bush puts together the coalition to have Desert Storm, where we have 40 countries of the willing to basically band together under U.S. leadership and take Saddam Hussein and kick him out of Kuwait.
So, Tom, can I ask you this question? No, not to interrupt you. I apologize, but you mentioned 40 countries in this coalition. Were any of those Middle Eastern countries?
Well, a lot of them.
So tell me,
starting with Saudi Arabia, they're right in
they became part of the coalition
against
Iraq.
They're right. And in fact, Saudi Arabia lets us put an air base in Saudi Arabia, which is what leads to, and interestingly at the time, an unknown guy is trying to get Saudi Arabia to let him back, Desert Storm and all of that. And, that later they reject him, and he later turns against Saudi Arabia and us. But anyway, the U.S. military goes into Kuwait, short war, 100 hours or something, and basically defeat the Iraqi military and let them out. Now, the Iraqis then are driving their tanks north, a couple hundred miles from Kuwait back into Iraq. And many, many military leaders in the U.S. are saying, take them out, kill, just destroy all those tanks, create another trail of tears. And President H.W. refuses to do that. And the main reason is he didn't want to completely destroy the Iraqi army because he knows they're the only things keeping Iran in check. That continuing hatred between Iran. So he lets that military return pretty much unscathed back to Iraq and maintain their position of strength.
A lot of people didn't understand that about Herbert Walker Bush, why he didn't take out Saddam Hussein. And there was a very good, legitimate reason. And you just brushed up against it, Tom. We certainly exercised every exercise we could to get him out after the 9/11 incident. But, it was just interesting that he was smart enough to leave him there and then try to manage it. Tom, let me ask you this. So for the edification of the listener, what do you think the motivating factor was in getting involved in the Middle East? Because we certainly wasn't because we were all worried about Kuwait. Let's be candid.
Well, in the long run, our policies in the Middle East have been, we advertise it as we're going to spread democracy. We're going to get these countries that have been dictatorships or monarchies, and we're going to straighten them out, and they're going to adopt our system of, elected represented government. And then others, more cynical, believe that it was because we wanted some say in how the oil got dispersed and who was operating the oil wells. And that was a big part of our relationship with Saudi Arabia, with OPEC, was it had to do with oil. So,
Tom, okay, I'm sorry. Finish what you're saying. Sorry, I apologize.
Well, that's what I was saying, that it had to do with control of oil in the Middle East, control of OPEC, which was the group of Arabic countries that made oil, basically.
We forgot to mention, Tom, which was really critically important and leading up to 9/11, was how our government armed and funded the Mujahideen to fight back the Russians during their invasion in the 80s. There's a lot of interesting moving parts in this government, and I hate to be suspect sometimes as to what the motivation is. sadly, we make reference to military industrial complex, oil. There's a lot of denominators, a lot of moving parts here. It's also been alluded to that we were kind of paying Russia back for their behind the scenes involvement in Vietnam. How they were driving that from a back seat. But we forgot to mention this little episode with Afghanistan, where we initially funded heavily a pushback against the Russians. And I know historically, I think you would agree with this. After we pushed the Russians out, we did nothing to help them rebuild their infrastructure. I think that opportunity to build roads and sewerage and plumbing and schools and hospitals, and infrastructure to help their children, right? As I always say, we did nothing, Tom. Correct me if I'm wrong.
The interesting thing about the Afghan war when Russia was there was that we provided about 1,000 Stinger missiles, shoulder operated, ground to air missiles. And the reason that was so effective, and I think probably the only war in history that actually the outcome was determined by one weapon. And the reason was that the way Afghanistan's terrain and infrastructure is, the only way the Soviet Union could move its troops around was by helicopter. And the helicopter was absolutely vulnerable to that weapon. So now later, when Russia, or the Soviet Union at that time, move out and go back to the Soviet Union, and everybody heralds that as their Vietnam. They go in there, they take over, they can't really start, run the country effectively, and after 10 years, they go home and leave it there. Interestingly, I was involved in a program where the U.S., in order to try to, make good with the Soviet Union, had a program to get back the missile launchers, the Stingers, that weren't used or weren't recovered. And we had an actual buying program. And I was involved in a number of operations with the CIA where they were trying to get those weapons back. And that was a whole other story of organized crime groups in Afghanistan. Even Russian organized crime groups were scamming us to sell those. We've got this weapon and here's the serial number and we're going to sell it back to you and all of that. And there were actually some CIA officers that were ambushed and killed in efforts to recover those missiles from the Mujahideen and others in Afghanistan. And we were recovering those on behalf of the Russians.
Tom, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come right back to this conversation. We're going to continue with this timeline that has led this country to a position of where we have a real serious problem trusting our government and subsequently our media since the advent of the 24-hour news cycle. Stay with us, guys. We're going to be right back. You're listening to Tom Fuentes, former assistant director of the FBI, with quite an interesting career path with the Bureau. Be right back, guys. Stay with me, please.
The world is in crisis, with political unrest and financially unstable countries trying to print their way to prosperity by taking on trillions of dollars of new debt. It's incredibly concerning. That's why you need to own silver as a hedge. So call today to receive the free hard asset information kit on how easy it is to own silver. Green energy demands will possibly turbocharge silver prices to 50, 100, even 300 an ounce, according to many experts around the world. Silver is a proven hedge against inflation. Since 1971, silver has returned over 11% when averaged yearly. Silver is a proven wealth preservation for hundreds of years. Hard Asset Management is a trusted leader in precious metals and rare coins for nearly 40 years. We have the guaranteed lowest prices, fast and easy ordering, expedited shipping, with award-winning customer service available 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. CST, Monday through Friday. So protect yourself from the chaos. Invest in stability with Hard Asset Management. Call now and get your free Hard Asset Management information kit on how easy it is for you to own silver. 844-426-4653. 844-426-4653.
We're back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Operation Truth. My name is Lou. You're listening to Tom. Tom is a former assistant director of the FBI, and as you can see, he's pretty literate. He's an interesting individual when you speak to him about the history or timeline of this country. Tom, what happened to Russia's economy after we're in the 80s again, Tom? I'd like to move into the 90s, but the 80s were pretty interesting. We had the wall come down. Am I correct, Tom? And
Yeah, but during the 1980s, the wall hadn't come down until the end of the 80s, and the Soviet Union didn't really dissolve until 1992, approximately. So throughout the 80s, you have the Soviet Union still in command or in operation in what is now the Russian Federation. But the mistake that we made was that the CIA miscalculated the Soviet Union as being economically way stronger than they actually were, and militarily much stronger than they were. So their economy was in much worse shape than we believed. But in any event, as the 80s progressed, we get toward the end of it, you have the wall come down in Berlin, and then you have, the gradual political change in the Soviet Union that leads to it dissolving in 1992. So that's the biggest change that happens. There's no more Soviet Union. Now, at that time, yes, their economy was in shambles. You have some of the republics that made up the Soviet Union. It was basically like a collection of countries. Some of them were allowed to go free, like Ukraine, Belarus, a few others, and then some weren't, like Chechnya was made to stay in, and that ushered in a whole 10 or 20 years of terrorism in Russia, then later in the Russian Federation. But in any event, the Soviet Union doesn't collapse in the 80s, but the collapse is basically beginning to unravel.
yeah, it's interesting to watch how our policies influence the stability or instability of countries in this planet. I always say, Tom, that there's so much other than what we see on the surface. These are very convoluted relationships. I want to ask you, clearly it was President Reagan that made the comment about, bring down the wall, which is what ultimately transpired, and subsequently the liberation of countries like Czechoslovakia, the Ukraine, right? Any number of countries in the Eastern Bloc that I guess Putin now is preoccupied with wanting to pull back into the Soviet Union. I think he'd like to recreate, although that's not going very well. But
that's another issue and discussion about
that's
whether
another
that's really
decade.
true
I know.
or not.
I know. We got to wait till we get to that decade.
Okay,
of
let's
crazy,
get to that
because what we're starting to pick up on is we go from decade to decade with crazy is really what it comes down to, and I hate to be critical of the country, but I do it with the intent of maybe getting us back on course, because our foreign policies suck, to put it to you politely. I think this whole insinuation or overpresence of the United States in the Middle East, kind of like the
our
Ukraine.
foreign policy since the end of World War II is we are really, even at the time, it was the US and the Soviet Union both regarded as superpowers, but the reality was it's mainly the US. And our US foreign policy since then has been based on we can run the world. We can spread our democracy everywhere and make everybody just like us, and we can control what countries do, and we can use our reserve currency to put pressure on countries to do it our way. So there's a lot of issues that come from pretty much our idea that we're in charge of the world.
I think it actually fed a narrative that we wanted to create, that there was this threat from the Soviet Union, really, that wasn't as threatening as they wanted the public to believe, because it justified us in other positions domestically, and perhaps how we arm the country, any myriad of topics. I think it just fed an agenda, so to speak. I want to slip into the 90s just for a moment, Tom. Interesting times. I have mixed emotions about Bill Clinton, to be very candid with you. I told you, and I mentioned that Monica Lewinsky was one of my clients, a very nice young girl. Her mother was a doll. We were with her. I think we hooked up with her through Simon & Schuster, who was the publicist for the Duchess of York, who I've worked for 31 years, ironically. And the Clinton years were interesting years. He inherited an America that I guess we needed to continue to pay attention to what was going on in the Middle East. Would you agree, Tom? And did he do that?
We have to keep paying attention, absolutely.
But the question is, did he do that?
Well, that is a good question.
Do you have an opinion?
I'm not sure to what extent he did or didn't do it at the time. I think there was also a lot of attention on China, and Clinton was instrumental in getting China into the world economic system, backing them up as a developing country. They still use that. China is still a developing country, so they don't have to worry about Green New Deals. They're opening a new coal-fired energy plant each day in China. So China's gotten away with this. Oh, we're just a developing country. We're a developing economy. We're to be given special privileges as a result of that. Clinton started that going during his administration.
Yeah, what's so interesting about this conversation is Bill Clinton is not a slouch. He's a fairly smart man. I mean, he has some issues personally, quite frankly. I mean, he appears to might be like a predator with women.
Yeah.
He was accused of rape.
I don't think personally he's as smart as Hillary.
I agree 100%. Well, listen, if we're going to have this conversation, I think she's far more divisive than he is.
No, that's not divisive. I'm saying she's smarter than he is. She created the Clinton Foundation, and essentially she did break the glass ceiling. She is the first woman in the world to be in charge of a major international organized crime group.
That's a very, very stout allegation, Tom. And
we'll go into that, and I'll back it up.
And we're going to go into that, but I'd like to talk about Benghazi before we do that, which was another interesting episode in the history of this country, dealing with the credibility or the believability of our government. What I found most interesting about this episode in Benghazi is not one single asset or resource ever made it to Benghazi to help extract anyone from that country. Is that a correct statement, Tom?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so what was your assessment of Benghazi and the manner in which our State Department, under her tutelage, how was it handled? It was Obama's administration.
In addition to the actual incident of Benghazi itself, which gets the ambassador killed, basically. But the issue that, she engineers the overthrow of Gaddafi. Now, Muammar Gaddafi, the head of Libya at the time, he had already started to turn into pretty much becoming American ally, or at least not opposing us so strenuously. We overthrow him, the dictator of Libya, get him killed. The revolt happens. You see the videos of him being killed laying on the ground. That country has been a failed state ever since, a home of terrorism ever since that happened. So we do these systems where we overthrow a government and don't put anything feasible in place to protect the country or to make it, peaceful. We just kill them. They're in disarray. They're a failed state, and they still are almost to some extent.
But what, Tom, my question is from the standpoint of our country, what's the upside of allowing that to happen? And I do want to ask you about another thing regarding Benghazi and a program that I bumped into where our CIA was attempting to recover weaponry from there as well.
Right.
You shake your head yes anytime you like. I mean, this is how crazy and convoluted this is. But so let's just dip back into Bill Clinton's administration before we start to go into the next administration of Bush and then subsequently Barack Obama. Clinton was credited for not having a war during his 8 years in office. But do you think his foreign policies or his remissful, attentive approach to terrorism, in particular the activities of Bin Laden, precipitated 9/11?
Sure. They had a chance. They had intelligence about what Bin Laden was up to. And that Bin Laden, going back to the Afghan war with Russia, Bin Laden at the time goes in and starts working with the Mujahideen. Now, what's interesting is the Afghans didn't really trust the Arabs that Bin Laden brought in, including himself, but they went along with it. They're helping defeat the Soviet Union. Now, what happens is Bin Laden becomes completely bitter with with Saudi Arabia, because he wanted to be the savior of Saudi Arabia and have a leadership role in how they address their foreign policy. And instead, Saudi Arabia lets us build an air base in Saudi Arabia on the ground there, which he regarded as sacrilegious. And we used that air base later in Desert Storm. So in that sense, that starts bin Laden on the path of being anti-Saudi, which was difficult because his father was the major construction official of the Saudi government. And that's how his father had become a multi-billionaire. And his father, with 40 some children, including bin Laden being one of them, make them all multi-millionaires in the process. So bin Laden's a little bit delicate when handling relations with Saudi Arabia, but he's not delicate in saying he's anti-US. And that starts him back at that time on the path to doing terrorist acts against us.
Yeah, but for a very brief window in time, Tom, when we were supporting Afghanistan, he was part of that mechanism there, correct?
Well, he went to support the Mujahideen.
That's my point.
Which we did also. We gave them 1,000 Stinger missiles.
Yeah, that's my point, Tom. So for that little window in time, you know, he was aligned with our agenda, which was basically to help the Afghan people and the Mujahideen push back on the Soviet Union. Again, this is just a very open-ended question. Did we further antagonize bin Laden? Not that there's any justification for anything that he ever did, by not coming in after the fact and starting to rebuild or help them legitimize Afghanistan back in the 90s, for example. You see my point, Tom? In other words,
at that time, bin Laden had no, all he was going was against the Soviets for invading, a Muslim country. So he didn't really have any great desire to rebuild Afghanistan or any of that, but he did want credit for helping defeat the Soviet Union and, bring support there. So he didn't want the U.S. to get all the credit for helping win that war.
Wasn't he recognized though, Tom, for having pushed back against the Soviets?
Nah, so. Not as much as the respect he really wanted was kick the United States out of Saudi Arabia. No military bases, air bases, training Saudi pilots to fly American jets. All of the efforts that we made to help Saudi Arabia and their military and their government and everything else, he was very much against that. He wanted to be the guy that was basically the most important.
It's interesting, guys, as you're listening to this, you can just hear how each decade, each presidential administration kind of creeps into the next, and all of the administrations intersect in some way, shape, or form. And what it really comes down to is that there has to be a realignment in foreign policy in this country. I think the days of insinuating this nation into the business of other countries like the Middle East coming to an end. We're not going ahead to the Ukraine right now because, we still need to talk about the 90s and what transpired and what may have precipitated the attack on 9/11. We're not even into that decade yet, or that administration under George Bush. But, you can just see there's always this undercurrent, there's always this agenda that, although it may serve a few, doesn't seem to serve the many, which is the country as a whole. And we experienced that on 9/11 because we lost a lot of people on 9/11. And this will probably interest people to know that we've lost more people as a result of 9/11 with the toxicity of that air that one of our governors reassured us, Whitman, that the air was fine. I just lost a very dear friend of mine, Hector Santiago, who was on the police commissioner's detail, which is how I met him, Police Commissioner Carrick. He just succumbed to cancer, started out as prostate, all directly related to 9/11. I want to continue this conversation, Tom, about the 90s and how the Clinton administration ushered in 9/11. You'll give me a couple of minutes on that. And we're going to have to wrap after that.
Well, I think that, we were already aware through our intelligence of what bin Laden was up to, and that he was in Afghanistan, pretty much given safe haven by the Taliban there to have his training camp. And he was training members of Al-Qaeda to be terrorists. It was, and you see videos of them on the monkey bars jumping around and, doing various military type exercises. And the U.S. was aware that bin Laden was behind it because we had satellite photos of these individuals on the ground. And among them was a guy that was 6'5" who stuck out like a sore thumb in the middle of all of these Afghan and Arabic people on the ground in the training camps. So we were well aware. At one point, there was talk of trying to basically take him out, kill him as a leading terrorist. And basically, some members of the Saudi royal family visited these camps, and there was always some celebrity at the camps. So Clinton held off and did not issue orders to take him out. And so later we have, we have the attack on the USS Cole in October of 2000, determined to be an Al-Qaeda attack. We have an attack also at that time of the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, and hundreds of people die during those two terrorist attacks. And we learned that's Bin Laden's behind that. And then he issues his statements that he's going to attack the United States. And so now we know he's going to come do it. We didn't really take the measures that possibly we could have taken to eliminate him early before he's able to put the attack in motion that becomes the 9/11 attack.
Tom, who was behind the 93 World Trade Center bombing? Was that Bin Laden?
Ramzi Youssef, one of the terrorists, I guess, with that group, did the initiation of a truck bomb in the basement of World Trade Center in 93. And that killed a few people and all of that. What's interesting, later, when the FBI travels to Pakistan and gets him as a prisoner to bring him back to the U.S. and face charges for that, as the assistant director at the time, Tom Picard, told me later, they're flying back over New York City, heading for the airport, and Ramzi Youssef is looking out, and Picard tells him, look, it's still there. World Trade Center is still there. And Ramzi Youssef says, not forever, we'll get it. So he's predicting in 93 what's going to happen in 2001.
Tom, we're going to wrap today, but there's another interesting question, I think, and it deals with our intelligence community. Did they properly inform Bill Clinton as to exactly the extent or extreme nature of this threat from Bin Laden towards the latter part of the 90s, which subsequently ushered into George W. Bush's administration? When we come back next week, Tom, we're going to get into that discussion because we're not finished with the 90s yet. I think there has to be a much broader discussion as to what really precipitated 9/11. Guys, I want to thank Tom Fuentes, my co-collaborator on this show. I apologize for not having him on the prior episode. As you can see, this discussion about the economy and this transition into digital currency is pretty extensive and requires a lot of thought and discussion and information to be provided to the American public so they can see what's coming their way. Guys, this has been between I just about to say between the lines, but it's not. It's Operation Truth. And I want to thank Tom Fuentes again. And we hope to see you next week, guys.
Thank you, Lou.
Thank you, Tom. It's always insightful.